Well, let's start. It's a little bit after 10. Welcome everybody. We have Abby Rubenfeld, Nashville civil rights lawyer, and Joe Woolley, who is the CEO of the Nashville LGBT Chamber. You can see that right behind his head. We are glad that both, on both sides. We're really appreciative that you both are here. And let me run through a couple of different things before we start. So I've got Councilmember John Rutherford is on, and the County Clerk Brenda Wynn is on. We appreciate you all being here. Our numbers as of right now, the old numbers that I had, this is from yesterday. I was looking for the new Nashville numbers. But we have in Nashville, we have 8,876 confirmed cases of COVID-19, 96 deaths. As of yesterday, that was 232 new cases. So we're watching that very, very closely. Tennessee yesterday recorded its largest number of new cases in the history of this thing. Obviously, it goes back to when we started recording this at the beginning of the year. 1,410 new cases on Friday, highest ever. We are almost at the 40,000 person mark at 39,444 confirmed cases, 577 deaths. As most of you probably know, the Metro Board of Health met yesterday at 4 p.m. in an emergency meeting and mandated that people in Davidson County wear masks. They are still working on the policy behind that, and I think we can talk about that in a few minutes, just what anybody knows, because I know that the policy is supposed to go into effect tomorrow at 5 p.m. But people should be wearing masks. Dr. Jahangir, the guy you always see with the mayor, the chairman of the Board of Health, I think was helpful in all this. I talked to him on Thursday. What I've been hearing all along is that the way, one of the ways to try to deal with this, if we're not going to close back down, is for people to practice social distancing and to wear those masks. And it just seems it's not that hard of a thing to do. You can get masks almost anywhere. People have masks. Just put them on. You're protecting yourself and others. Mainly, you're really protecting others. But it just seems like a simple step. And as some of you may have heard when I was talking about Abby, Abby about her going to other courts around the state, most people aren't wearing them. And if you walk around Davidson County in Nashville, people aren't wearing them. If you go to the grocery stores, they're not wearing them. It just seems like something simple, and it's not that difficult. So anyway, so the way we normally start, I give you a few minutes and tell viewers, in case they don't know who you are you? Abby, a little bit about yourself, and then I'll go to Joe, and then we're going to jump right into the court case.
Well, thanks for inviting me to be on your show, Jim. I'm an attorney in private practice. I have my own law firm. I do primarily family law. If you need a divorce, call me, or if you need doing an adoption. But I also do a lot of civil rights work, all kinds of discrimination, with a particular emphasis on LGBT rights, and I've been doing that for 41 years. And I'm a wife, a mother, a Democrat, a lefty. I'm Jewish. I don't know what else I am. Right-handed. There you go.
Thank you. So, Joe, are you right or left-handed? And a little bit about yourself.
I'm right-handed.
Okay.
Born and raised in Idaho. I moved to Nashville 20 years ago in 2000, and came out, met amazing LGBT people here, and realized that you could be LGBT and live an open life, something I never imagined in Idaho. I met great people like Abby Rubenfeld and other LGBT leaders, and they've taught me kind of everything I know. My husband, Jim, and I were founders of the Tennessee Equality Project back in 2004 with others, and then went to Belmont, Nashville's home, got involved in the chamber several years ago as a board member, served as president of that organization with our former CEO, Lisa Howe. And when she moved away and left us, I thought, why not do the job full time and get paid for it? And I applied for the CEO position, and that's what I've been doing for the last few years. And the chamber advocates and educates for our LGBT and allied businesses, from corporations down to nonprofits and our small businesses. At the state level, at Metro, we advocate, and it's busy. It's a full-time job, but it's a great job.
Great. So happy Pride. I know this is Pride Month, and I think this was supposed to be the weekend where we do lots of activities, and obviously that's been scaled back. But tell me a little bit more about how have we been able to deal with this, with the pandemic? What are there events going on, or is anything really planned for Pride Month and for this weekend, basically?
Yeah, right now we would have been getting ready to walk down Broadway last year. Record attendance at the parade that went straight down Broadway and then up 2nd Avenue into the public park. 70,000 people, I believe, they saw last year on this weekend. But all of that, of course, is not happening. Nashville Pride, the organization that puts on Pride, they have done a great job of bringing virtual Pride to everybody all month long. I would recommend everybody go check out all the different programming that they have on their website. They're looking at doing some in-person events, smaller in-person events in October, if the COVID-19 outbreak allows that, and celebrating Pride in what is LGBTQ History Month is October. So they're looking at that, but everybody else has taken their stuff virtual, like everything else. And we just put on a concert in conjunction with the Austin LGBT Chamber that highlighted 2 great cities known for music. We did that last night and raised funds for LGBT artists in each city. So people have gotten really creative. The chamber at the beginning of the month, though, because of the conversation that was going on around Black Lives Matter and racism, we put out a statement as well as other LGBT groups saying, yes, happy Pride. Pride started as a riot 51 years ago. We need to be focused on this conversation right now, and we need to be doing our part. And you have really seen that from the LGBT community, taking Pride Month and focusing on this issue. And I've been really proud of the way our members and the community have responded and are talking about this issue. So it's a different Pride Month altogether, from the virus to the other conversation that we are having.
May I add something, Jim?
Yeah, sure.
Just in terms of legal stuff. Yesterday was the 5-year anniversary of our marriage equality victory in the U.S. Supreme Court, which of course Tennessee played a prominent role. Ours was one of the 4 cases that went to the Supreme Court. And we had, since we couldn't celebrate at an in-person Pride event, we had a continuing legal education program that was put on by the Tennessee Bar Association, which has an LGBT section now, which right there in itself blows me away that Tennessee Bar Association has that, and it's active. And each year we have the LGBT CLE, but this year it was focused solely on the Obergefell, we call it Obergefell /Tenko, which was our case. But we had that whole thing, and it was virtual yesterday, and our trial judge and Sissy Daughtry, who was one of the 6th Circuit judges, also participated. So we did acknowledge that huge moment, rivaled only by the huge moment this past week with the Title VII case. Right.
Well, let's jump into that. Very good on yesterday, and then let's talk about what happened this week. So I checked with Abby before. We're calling it the Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia, but it was several cases that actually merged into the ruling. 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court. Gorsuch was the writer of the opinion. There were, I think, 2 dissenting opinions, even though the vote was 6-3. The ruling came on Monday. It dealt with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it's my understanding it based around the bar's employment discrimination. It was really focused on the basis of sex, and I think that's where the ruling came down. So, Abby, why don't you start us off? What can you tell us about the cases that merged, some of the history behind it, if you know it, and then basically what does the case say? And then we'll get into some questions about it, particularly how it applies in Tennessee.
Okay, well, Title VII, as people probably know, was adopted in the 1960s. It prohibits employment discrimination based on a number of the usual categories, including sex. And the issue in this case was whether the word sex in the statute also prohibits discrimination against LGBT people, in particular L and G and T specifically. And the three cases involved two gay men and a trans woman. And one of the gay men, had joined it became known that he was a member of a gay softball team, and he was fired. And the other one told a customer, he was a parachute guy, he told a customer that he was gay, kind of in a joke, so she wouldn't be afraid that he was, when they jumped together, that you're touching. So I think he was trying to put her at ease. He wasn't harassing her, and he got fired. And then in the trans case, Amy Stevens, who was such a brave person, she passed away about a month before the decision and didn't get to see her big victory in the Supreme Court. But she worked at a funeral home and started out presenting as a man and then transitioned. And as soon as she told them she was transitioning, they fired her. And this decision is like huge. It's as big or even bigger than our marriage victory, because before now, in many of the states in the country, including Tennessee, LGBT people had absolutely no job protection unless they happened to have an employer with a policy that prohibited it. And even those are not necessarily enforceable in court. So the downside of this decision is that Title VII only covers employers with 15 or more employees. So it's not going to cover a lot of people, people that work for mid-sized employers, but it's a huge, huge start, and it sends a huge message, especially because Gorsuch wrote the opinion. And in some ways, it's not surprising that he did, because he applied his textualist argument that, words have their normal meaning. And to his credit, he applied the normal meanings in this situation as he does in many others, even though, he's not known as a friend of the LGBT community, but the opinion is extremely powerful. One of the things that really stands out to me is that they used the right pronouns for Amy Stevens. They treated her with such respect. Somebody must have really helped him. He must have an LGBT law clerk or something. But the opinion uses all the right terms. It talks about Amy presenting one way. I mean, it uses the right language, which is small and non-LGBT people may not notice that. But for me, as a lesbian lawyer, it's so gratifying to see a Supreme Court decision where all the right words are used and we're not treated with disrespect. Because, I was involved in the Hardwick case about sodomy laws in 1986. And in that case, they did not use respectful words. They quoted from the Bible. I mean, the transition of the court is just amazing. And this case will be huge, and it sets a huge precedent that will be followed in many other cases. Now, this only applies to Title VII, but the definition of sex that's used in Title VII, for example, Tennessee has a non-discrimination statute that covers 7 or more employees. So that's going to pull in more people. And by case law, our statute is interpreted at least as to have as much protection as the federal law. We have case law also saying our laws can be interpreted to have more protection. So we're going to at least have what the feds have. So that's going to help us under state law. It's going to help us in Title IX cases about discrimination in schools. Although all of that is going to probably have to have additional litigation. I mean, employers should we should all do the right thing when we get these rulings, but of course we know that doesn't happen. Like, I went to segregated schools till 1968 myself, even though the Supreme Court ruled in 1954 that was supposed to end. So we know it won't happen overnight, but this is just a huge, huge victory. And the fact that it was 6-3 also helps us. I wish that Roberts had done the right thing in the marriage case, so that would have been 6-3. I mean, I'm glad for the victory, but 6-3 versus 5-4 is a huge difference, especially to conservatives when we talk about the Supreme's ruling. And I don't know if this means a major shift in how Gorsuch is going to rule on cases affecting us. I doubt it. but he did the right thing. He read the law the way it should be read. And, you know, we have this amazing victory that will make Joe's work somewhat easier, hopefully.
So Joe, were you surprised by the decision? I mean, so
Very.
Abby just said, I mean, the 6-3 ruling surprised you, Abby, as well.
Yes.
I mean, you weren't sure where Gorsuch
The
might
whole
go.
thing surprised me. I wasn't sure
Okay.
we would win that.
That was me. The whole thing surprised me that we won. I had to look at my phone several times and check several articles and make sure I was reading it right, that we won on all 3 cases, that it went our direction on both sexual orientation and gender identity. And there were scenarios where you could win one but not the other. And then there was the scenario where we lost on both. And I will tell you, on national, we've been planning for this ruling to come down and what the response would be. And talking with other national groups that were pivotal in trying the case, we really weren't sure. And in fact, I would say people that said they were sure they were going to go like this, we were pretty sure it was going to go the other way, to be honest. We were hopeful, but historic, monumental, surprising. The press, we got calls because, of course, this deals with the workplace. So we got lots of calls and talked to a lot of people after the ruling on Monday. And the number one thing that we heard was, how is this still an issue? I didn't even know this existed. And it made me laugh because there was a lot of LGBT people that didn't know that you could be fired. There were a lot more allies that didn't know this could happen, or this was still an issue in 2020. And I think after marriage equality 5 years ago, some LGBT people and a lot of allies thought, oh, the struggle's over, we can move on. They forgot that you could get married on Saturday and fired on Monday. That's the old term that gets used and thrown around. But you really could in 28 states. 28 states had little to no protection for the LGBT community in the workforce. And that was just a big wake-up call and reminder that the struggle continues. And that's been our message, because while we've had this win, there is a lot more to do. And we're still under attack in access to healthcare, in access to education. You see those at the state level being attacked, and the federal level. Don't forget that on the Friday before this Monday opinion, the Trump administration took away transgender coverage in healthcare and push that policy out. And Abby, I'd love to know from you, there's a lot of talk that they did that on that day because they might have known the ruling was coming, somebody had tipped them off, and they had to get that out there before the announcement, because it would have changed that whole process on them getting it out Friday versus after the ruling came down on Monday. But again, all of these other things are going to make their way through the court, specifically around healthcare, education, raising a family, adoption law, etc.
But I think that I didn't hear that about, but that wouldn't surprise me if they did, because the term is supposed to end on June 30th. So, and usually all the controversial or, important big decisions are left to the end. So they knew it was going to come out at some point soon. So that's entirely possible that they did that. It would not surprise me given their animus on this issue. But I do think that policy is going to be, is suspect and is going to be subject to challenge now because of this ruling. But just points out what we've both been talking about, that now we're going to have to do a case by case, and statute by statute, rule by rule challenge. But we have huge, huge ammunition now with that ruling. And the fact that Gorsuch wrote it, makes all the difference in the world. And, it's also a good sign I hope it's a good sign that the Supreme Court is not going to just be a lackey for Trump. They are going to apply the law. I sure hope it means that.
So, Abby, let me ask you a question. There'll be lots of follow-ups from this, but so the first question, one of the people wrote during this week as we led up to today was, how is this even legal in 2020? I mean, how are we still dealing with allowing people to discriminate? And I know there's more out there, because you're saying there's more out there, but the question was, how is this even legal now?
Well, it wasn't. But you also have to think that there's still tons of discrimination based on race and religion and national origin and color. And, you know, like, unfortunately, having laws that protect people are only the first step. You know, they adopt laws because there's a problem, and then they got to enforce the laws, and you have to change people's minds. And just like my example of segregated schools took an awfully long time. And of course, that's a separate discussion about schools kind of resegregating now. But adopting the laws doesn't change the doesn't stop the problem. It just gives tools to fight it. And what's been happening since Title VII was adopted is there were numerous decisions in federal courts saying that discrimination based on sexual orientation was not covered by it. And then we started kind of a little bit of a progression in the last year or so, well, more than that, since with the Obama administration and their Justice Department, the EEOC adopted a policy that the word sex did include sexual orientation and gender identity. And that helped in some cases, but now that the Supreme Court has said that, then that's what the law is. But I think the reasoning in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity, I think the issue was that people argued it was not included because it wasn't thought of by the Congress in 1964, when they adopted this in the 60s. And the Supreme Court addressed that in the decision, saying that's not a good reason. If there's collateral effects based on what the meaning of the words is, the meaning of the words are, it doesn't matter what they thought at the time. What matters is the natural definition of the word.
So was one of the dissenting opinions talking about that, basically going back to 1964 and saying that's what the words meant, so that's what and then they were talking about that it had to be legislated. At least I think I saw that in one of the dissents.
Well, you're a better man than me because I didn't read the dissents. I don't care. They're dissents. They lost.
I know. Okay. Well,
but I know that it was a vicious dissent by Sam Alito, who I went to college with. I tell people I dated him. He made me pregnant. It's a joke.
All right. So this is being recorded. I just want you to know that.
That's why I said it was a joke.
I understand. I got it. Well, okay. So I'm going to come back to you in just a minute. Joe, you want to follow up on the basic question was, how was this even legal in 2020? I mean, it's like I don't know. It's amazing to me that we still have this stuff, and obviously we still got more of it, but your opinion on it.
It's the same way some people say, I can't believe racism's still a thing. I'm not a racist. Okay, yes, but it still exists and we're still fighting it. So I laugh because it's definitely still a thing. It was definitely still happening. My call to people is educate yourself on injustices that are happening. There are a lot of them out there. And if we're not all woke, to use the term, and focused on them, how do they change rapidly? So educate yourself on these types of issues. Yes, it was still a thing. Yes, there's still more. I mean, we just wrapped up the legislative session. We had a record number anti-LGBT bills filed this session that we worked to stop. It is still happening. They are still actively working to take rights away from people. And for the second major time in a short span, in 5 years, millions of Americans woke up without rights and they went to bed with rights because of a Supreme Court case. Marriage equality, now this one. And when you talk to allies or you talk to people that aren't in marginalized communities or this doesn't affect, and you talk about that, how I woke up without certain rights and then I went to bed with rights. I think they start to wake up and realize and say, oh, wow, that's still a thing. Oh, wow, I need to hopefully educate myself on other issues like this, and then hopefully join in the fight to remedy them.
Okay, so Abby, go back to the case itself. What else, do you know of anything else in the pipeline that's coming that is going to deal with some issues that are still remaining? I mean, this obviously was a big, big case. are there other things, maybe not this term in the Supreme Court, but are there other things that you know of that are heading towards the court where now you've got a 6-3 decision where some other things may be addressed as well?
Well, there could be huge exceptions to this victory based on so-called religious freedom, because I think people are totally misusing the concept of religious freedom to instead enforce religious bigotry and to use that as a sword to stop protections for people. And we have to figure out a way to have a better balance that's not in favor of someone simply saying, well, I have a personal belief. I don't like homosexuals, or whatever word they use. And so I shouldn't be forced to hire them. And right now, some of the courts are allowing that kind of reasoning, and it can't be. I mean, traditionally, we've had religious exemptions are built into non-discrimination laws, saying that you can't force a church to go against its belief. You can't force a church to hire a minister, or a synagogue to hire a rabbi against their beliefs. If their beliefs are that homosexuality is a sin and that they don't want to hire gay people, we can't force a church to do that. But there is a question like, what about a janitor where religious beliefs don't matter? Or what about, the decision involving Hobby Lobby a number of years ago was quite a problem. And since then, we've been going further with that, saying that, if corporations, which I'm sorry, I just cannot accept that a corporation is a person. It is not, even though some courts say that they are. But if a corporation has believes it's against their strongly held beliefs that gay people are normal and equal, and they don't want to hire them, that decision said that they could refuse to. And that's just wrong. To me, that's an abuse of the wonderful protections we have in this country to protect religious freedom. And as in everything under our Constitution, there has to be a balancing, and the balancing needs to be fair. And you're talking about different rights: the rights to have a job and to be a productive citizen, the right to be yourself, versus the right to have religious beliefs. And in your home and in your church, you can think whatever you want, but as an employer, as a person offering services, it should not be that you can say, well, I don't like that particular group, so I don't have to treat them equally, or I don't have to serve them, or I don't have to hire them. That's wrong. And those are the kind of cases that are, this whole issue of so-called religious freedom is in the pipeline working its way up. And frankly, I'm worried about it, because Gorsuch, who helped us in this case, I'm worried about him on those kind of cases.
So just for people who may not fully understand all this, and me being probably one of them, is so this case Monday was a major deal. Yes. But that the ability to, I don't know if the right word is discriminate based upon a religious belief, could still be utilized even though this case came out on Monday, right?
Yes. Yeah. And some of these so-called religious freedom cases go beyond religion. It's some of these so-called religious freedom statutes adopted in various states use words like strong personal beliefs. They don't even have to be based on religion. And that's just wrong. Like, so if somebody, is still a Klansman and doesn't like Black people, should they be able to say, well, I have strong beliefs on that and I don't have to hire them? That's just not what our country's about. And that's not what these laws were intended. So I hope that'll get reined in, but I'm worried with this current Supreme Court. I wish the 6-3 showed that we're home free, but I'm pretty worried.
I got it. Joe, comments?
I think it's a good sign for the other cases that we will have coming, like access to healthcare, access to or educational standing. I think, transgender, playing the sport under the gender you identify as is the next big thing coming through the courts. This will have an impact on that. Access to healthcare for transgender individuals, another one this is a good sign for. But there's, as Abby pointed out, there's plenty to be concerned about. I would go I wanted to touch base though on the corporate support. Over 200 corporations signed an amicus brief on this case that have policies that protect workers that don't allow LGBT individuals to be fired in business. Business has really led on this issue, and I think that had a lot to do with where we are in this country. I'm always amazed by the conversations that corporations are having with their employees around these issues, and I still think that business and corporate America are leading by example around this by the discussions they're having internally. I love to go in and have these tough conversations because in a workplace, you have to play by certain rules and you have to be respectful, and both sides have to listen to the other one and other side and have a conversation. And that's how bridges are built. You're not able to just put off your wall or stop following somebody. So that kind of goes to the work that we do. But I do think business played a large role in this with their support and leading by example of not firing LGBT people.
Okay. So, Abby, back to you. Question popped in, and I think it come up this week. Implementation of this case in a right-to-work state like Tennessee. What is the overall impact of it?
Well, this trumps the right to work because, yes, we're a right to work state. You have a right to work. It's this kind of this myth that employees and employers are on equal footing and you both get to negotiate, which we all know isn't true. The employer has all the power. It's not an equal negotiating, but nonetheless, we have a right to work state, but you still can't fire somebody or refuse to hire someone based on a prohibited category that's protected by law. You can't discriminate in your right to work. If the reason you're not hiring someone is because of their gender, or now because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity or their race, or their national origin or their religion, then that trumps the right to work. Then the employer is in violation of a federal or a state statute, and there can be ramifications. They can be required to hire the person. They can be required to pay damages and attorney fees. So this helps us in Tennessee. It's especially helpful to people like us in a state that has more limited job protections and has a right to work. This does give some protection to people who are in all those protected categories.
Okay. And this applies to businesses that are 15 people or more, that employ 15 or more.
Right. Okay. But as I said, the Tennessee law, there may have to be a case to establish this, but the case law in the Tennessee non-discrimination statute, which also includes sex, case law says that we interpret it all based on federal interpretations of Title VII. So that should help us on the state law, which covers 7 or more employees.
Okay. All right. All right. And do you think at some point there'll probably be some litigation on that, or will I assume that may be where it goes next in terms of?
Yes.
Because this still, obviously, it's a Supreme Court ruling. We know what it is, but there will be, I assume, lawsuits eventually over some of this stuff to try to make sure that it's interpreted correctly. And then you're going to get into that same thing where you've got Tennessee law that is now at 7 or more. And how does it apply there? So
yes, may I add something else to that? There's also a problem right now in our country for the past 3 years with the constitutional crisis that we live under sort of every day about the powers of the federal government versus state governments, the powers of the different branches of government. And we have people that don't think they have to listen to Supreme Court rulings, or that someone say something different and overturn them. So that whole issue is looming in the background too, like how to enforce this and to make sure that people are going to continue to follow the system we have in this country.
Let me ask, and Joe, maybe this is a better question for you. All right, major ruling, and obviously you get word out and people know about the ruling, but obviously there's a lot of businesses out there that do not follow the Supreme Court or that's rulings, or don't look at the paper to see what's going on. How do you get the messaging out there? How do you make sure that people do know that, hey, the Supreme Court has made a major decision, and this is now the law of the land. This is what has been upheld.
Well, I think that goes back to the question earlier of how was this a thing in 2020 and the surprise of people that it was. I think it did wake people up and they realize that now. And what's important is that LGBT people know that, so that if they are fired for that reason, they know that that is against the law and they can seek remedy of that. Don't you agree, Abby? Like, that is the wake-up call, and it goes to our community saying, no, I have a right. You can't do this to me legally.
Yes, and it also gives you power when you go, or gives you another powerful tool when you go to talk to employers, as you said you were doing, to educate them and to help them avoid the cost. I mean, litigation's not cheap. And when you lose a case like this, you can be ordered to pay the other side's attorney fees. That's a provision in the statute. So it can be very expensive. And, you know, even if they don't believe in the legal principle or the equity principle, businesses believe in the dollar, and, you know, they're not going to want those unnecessary costs.
Oh, you're absolutely right on that. And we work predominantly with businesses that are already doing the right thing or want to do the best thing they can. So give us guidance on that. But we saw after marriage equality, when benefits had to change, conservative companies going like, okay, this is the law, we want to follow it, we need to follow the rules, help us do that. And I think we'll see more of that, internal policy changes and statements of gender identity and sexual orientation being put into policy so they're protected from being sued. You're exactly right.
All right. Very interesting. All right. So it'll be interesting to watch these cases follow up and anything else happening, but obviously a major court case. Let me switch over for just a minute because we have a little bit of time left. I want to talk about the pandemic, and I want to talk particularly kind of switch back over to Joe on this one and say, okay, so, and we were talking a little bit about it before we got everybody back on the call. How are we dealing with, what issues are your chamber running into in terms of trying to deal with this, with the pandemic, with, you know, business closures or business having to kind of slow down or not operate at full capacity? And now we've got implementation of this mandated mask thing. And you, from a standpoint of the chamber, probably may know more about it than I do. I know that it's set to go in tomorrow at 5 p.m. But tell me a little bit about what the businesses are experiencing. Are they coming out of it okay? And then what is this mask thing going to mean for businesses across the city?
So our businesses that are members of the LGBT chamber are progressive businesses to begin with, due to the nature of our chamber. And they want to do what's right, and they want to follow the rules. And from the very start of this outbreak, we advocated that the government, that Metro, needed to close down businesses. It shouldn't have been left up to individual businesses to do the right and responsible thing, because if they do, their customers are just going to go right down the street to the business that isn't being responsible, and that hurts their employees and their business. So it needs to come from the top. I'm very proud of Metro for very early on shutting us down, going into a quarantine. The state then followed. The state has opened up, in my opinion, far too quickly. I'm glad that we've been able to govern ourselves with the reopening, and I think our plan is a solid one. Our members are trying to follow the rules, and having clear rules from the start has really been what we've been pushing for, and then tweaks to those rules. So we talked with the mayor's office and the health department on certain things with salons or small boutique gyms that aren't serving masses and could do appointment only things. So there's been a good balance of that and negotiation, and yes, that seems fair. It's not a one size fit all approach. And we've gotten to this point. But what businesses are really wanting to do is have clear directions to follow, know what's right, know what they can do and what's allowed, and give them good guidance to do that. And all of them, every member of ours, does not want to shut down again. Shutting down is going to kill them. It's killed a lot of them already by not being able to open up at full capacity. Many of our members just stayed closed until they were able to open up at 75% with phase 3 just recently, just this week, because it costs the same amount to keep that restaurant or business open with half capacity as it does with full. You can't you can't air condition half your building. You have to air condition all of it. So that's been a concern. We hit phase 3. They're scared for, they're confused and scared on what exactly they need to do. They're worried about their customers, and they're worried about their employees getting sick. And there's just a lot of apprehension. And then we get to phase 3 and we open up to that level and we keep moving forward. And now we see the spike that we're in now. And there's just a lot of frustration, fear, confusion. The mask order is coming. I think it's good. It needs to. I do not understand. We have been from the very beginning, and I commend again the health department and Mayor Cooper for the Wear Your Mask campaign. Early stage here in Nashville, there has been a push, wear your mask. It is a sign of respect that I'm covering my face and not infecting you if I was sick. And for some reason, this thing has turned into a political statement. I don't understand it. We're not listening to data and science on this. We as the general society, I think a lot of people are. And, I'm really proud of businesses that step up and say, you can't come in here if you don't do this. Like, we are protecting customers, we're protecting you. We've really pushed that, as well as everybody in leadership in Metro. It's up to you, the consumer, to have a lot of responsibility in this. If a business isn't doing something to keep you safe, you have the personal responsibility to go somewhere else. Don't go into a business that could infect you. And you need to do your part by wearing your mask and following the rules as well. I know a lot of phase 3 businesses that are opening, and now they're looking at this weekend and the mask ordinance, and they're rethinking everything else that they do. I think the mask ordinance is going to add to everything else. What do I need to do? What are the rules I need to follow? It's changing the game in the middle of playing the game. So there's going to be some catch up and learning that we need to do to help our businesses.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I'll tell you, I don't know yet either. One of the big issues going into, I think, yesterday's meeting with the Board of Health was, how do you enforce something like this? And then, Abby, I'm going to ask you a question in just a minute, legally related to this. But so I haven't seen anything about, I know there were concerns, because I know there's been situations in other places where people get really upset with being told that they have to do something. I'm with you. I mean, this is such an easy way of trying to protect people. It seems like such an easy, non-invasive way of just being safe and being safe to others. We know our numbers are going up. There's a tree about to fall down on my head. I just heard it crack. But this is such an easy way of trying to keep people safe. Have you heard anything about how they would enforce this? I mean, it would be almost, I know, I mean, you can't run around and try to chase everybody down, but have you heard anything about that?
I believe enforcement will be the same as it has been through all the phases, that if a business isn't following what the mask order says, the health department could come in and fine them like they can now. We have to wait. It's being written today. We'll have to wait and see exactly what the specifics are on individuals wearing them in public, not in an establishment.
All right. So Abby, love your legal mind. So tell me how this works with, I mean, we're in a pandemic. The world is in a pandemic. This country has the highest numbers of anybody. Let's see where the European Union will allow us to come over there. We get into a lot of different things, but I'll just say that um, I'm worried about the health and well-being of our country. And so my question to you is about masks. It's like, have you heard of people just suing over, I don't want to wear a mask, you're invading my personal freedoms, my personal rights? It would seem like the health and well-being of the safety of our public would kind of override that. I know this is, I know the mayor of Wilson County, Mayor Hutto, tried to do this the other day, declared a state of emergency, and then said everybody has to wear masks. And then somebody said you can't do that. So here we go. We're going through the Board of Health and trying to do it through the mayor. Have you looked at this enough to know is there something that I'm missing in this? It just seems like, for the safety and well-being of people, it seems like such an easy step to take. But yet, I hear numbers like 15% of the public are wearing them and nobody else is.
Well, I agree with you, but one thing I wanted to say before actually answering the question is, I would think from all these people that say, it's my body, you can't tell me what to do, we're going to have a big increase of support for the right to choice for women, because it's the same argument. It's my body, although I think the issues are completely different. But, but it's just ironic that a lot of the people that say that are also people who are against a woman having control over their body. But I think the police power, the state has police power, and it's always included the right to enforce public health issues. And you are correct, it's a pandemic, and the public health, our Board of Health is doing the right thing. They're trying to protect the health of the community that they are empowered to protect. So as a legal matter, I would think that that would be upheld as a justifiable use of the police power, because there is a pandemic. But there's two problems. One is just the practical politics of it. Like, are we really going to go out and start arresting, tons and tons of citizens because they won't comply? And the other problem is practical and political too, that I think a lot of the people that are resistant sincerely believe that there's no pandemic, that it's fake news. They listen to what's coming out of Washington and frankly out of Governor Lee's office that suggests that there's not really a pandemic. I mean, we're in this kind of a twilight zone in Tennessee and in states like Tennessee, like Arizona or Texas or Georgia or the other ones that are having huge increases now, where if you watch reasonable national news or you look at reasonable statistics put out by health agencies, you can see that the United States is in trouble and a whole bunch of states are in deep trouble. I mean, all of the ICU beds in Houston are full right now. They're going to have a crisis this weekend because of the exponential growth of cases and hospitalizations. But there are people that don't believe that that will happen, or that it is happening. And part of that goes back to what Joe was saying about Black Lives Matter and the whole racial thing going on in our country right now, that the reality is that this disease has impacted much more heavily people of color, Black people in particular. It impacts people in prisons. It impacts elderly who are in nursing homes. It impacts people that some people in our community think are expendable and don't really care. Like, that's a necessary, like, in order to continue business and open up, it's okay if we sacrifice those people, which I think is a terrible attitude. But part of the problem in enforcing this is getting into people's minds and getting beyond this ridiculous thought that the pandemic is made up, that there haven't been close to 125,000 deaths in this country. It's just astonishing to me that people still deny that, or say, like, it's my right not to wear a mask because you can't tell me what to do with my body. It doesn't matter the effect I'm going to have on other people. It's unbelievable to me.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes left. So let's follow up on that, because I'm always interested in, particularly, from the council standpoint, we've been telling people to be safe. We've been encouraging people to social distance. We actually are coming back into full session on July the 7th. It'll be the first time we come back, because the executive order is now going to expire on June 30th, which says that we can meet by teleconferencing. So we're going to have people back, and we're trying to get the chamber situated so people will be safe. people wear masks. You know, we want the public to come, but we want them to be safe. So we've got them situated in the back. But I guess the question is, with what you just said and what Joe has been saying, how do you get people to understand that, once again, we're all in this together? You know, this is not the who was it? It was somebody who said that COVID-19 is the great equalizer, because it doesn't care. It doesn't care whether you're rich, you're poor, you're black, you're white. It just doesn't care. It affects everybody. Fortunately, well, not fortunately, but you know, you at least initially you were going like, okay, young kids, okay, there's something for some reason they're not getting, but now it seems like they are, or younger people are. So we all are in this together. So I guess in the last few minutes that we've got, how do we get people to understand? I mean, whatever is working, whatever's out there right now really isn't working, because you have such a low amount of the population just not wearing masks. So how would you do it? Because if you say something good, I'm going to steal it, and then I'm going to use it at the council meeting. So, yeah.
You're exactly right that it is an equalizer. COVID doesn't see wealth, skin color, anything. It infects everyone. But to Abby's point, it affects marginalized communities at a much, much higher rate. Mm-hmm. And until the communities that don't believe in it and think it's a sham and a hoax are impacted severely, they're not going to change. And this might be where we're headed, where ICU capacity reaches its limits and you get in a car wreck and you die, or your family member dies because they didn't have an ICU bed and the medical system is overwhelmed. Or you do get sick and you lose somebody and our numbers spike, and then all of a sudden, oh, it affected me and now I'm paying attention, now I believe in it. And you have seen those stories of people that were posting and sharing and protesting against the lockdown and masks, and then they get it, and then it is an equalizer. And then it's like, oh, wow, my whole world shifted, and now I have something that I was saying didn't exist. I don't know what we can do except have leadership that talks about scientific facts and statistics, and we start listening to doctors and scientists rather than politicians and conspiracy theorists that are trying to prove points. Business is leading by example yet again by saying, you know, our corporate members aren't sending employees back into their offices until October, and then they'll reassess from there. There really is a small, I also think that there is a small vocal minority that is pushing this and amplifying it due to the world that we're in. So I think we just have to keep educating and keep being consistent with our messaging.
All right.
I would add that I think that we should ban people from watching Fox News, or get Fox News to start reporting real facts, true facts about, you know, I mean, there are only facts. There's not alternative facts. There's only facts, and that needs to be published. And I think part of the problem is some people have their head in the sand and they only listen to news sources that support what they believe, and they don't listen to the facts. And as Joe said, we have to get word out to people that among those 120,000 deaths are people who are like you, whoever you are. I mean, you know, there's 23-year-olds, there's 35-year-olds, there's 8-year-olds, you know, there's white people, there's black people, there's brown people, there's like everyone's affected. But if people won't listen and won't watch the sources that give them the information and won't believe it, I don't know how we get around. I mean, we're such our society is so like bifurcated now, or there's such a conflict between sides and people won't listen. And honestly, I don't know how you get around that, except as Joe said, leadership. We need, you know, the federal government to be telling people the truth. We need the state government to be telling people the truth. And at least y'all in local government are doing that, but we need the feds and the state to be doing that.
And while we're talking to the vice mayor and the local government, speaking of, Abby, following our rules, I really think it is important for us to follow the plan that we've put out there. And if we're not hitting our metrics, follow the rules of what we do. We don't continue to move forward. And if numbers spike too high, we move backwards. And I think that is a fear by a lot of businesses. They don't want to move backwards, but they also don't want to be overwhelmed. So follow the plan and lead on every level.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. I you know, just talking to people around and listening to you all, I don't think anybody really wants to go back, and it's hard to go back, but it just makes sense to me that if we want to keep going forward, that we do simple things like wearing those masks. It just seems to make sense, yet we can't seem to get people to do it. I don't know, but we've got to keep on. I like your mask. There you go.
Wear your mask. It's so easy.
All right. So it is now right at 11 o'clock. Y'all, both of you been great. Really, really interesting conversation. Love the case. Love the information on Bostock. Very, very important case. And y'all have been great in just talking about all this stuff, including what's happening with the pandemic. We have Barrett Hobbs coming in, not next week, because next Saturday is July 4th, but in 2 weeks, we have Barrett Hobbs, who is involved and owns, I don't know if he has a honky tonk, but he has a bar down on Broadway, so he's going to be talking about that. So it should be really, really interesting, because we've just been talking about people wearing masks, and particularly tourists coming back in. Anyway, we won't be here next week. We will be here on the 11th, so tune back in. Everybody be safe. Joe, Abby, thank you again. Everybody have a great weekend.
Happy Pride.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy Pride. Thank you.